Hi, welcome to Coach in Business and my today's episode about self-quantification. Basically, self-quantification is about quantifying, about displaying your life with the help of data, with the help of digital data. What I will do within this video is I will describe how such a process might look like. So how a process of self-quantification might look like, how this process of self-quantification can improve and can support a developmental process, how a digital consultant or a coach and psychologist can support you within this process of development and using data in support of this developmental process. And then at the end, and this is kind of the special addition to this video, I will show you how I quantified myself. So how my self-quantification process looked like, and what insights I generated based on the data about myself. So as a first step, let's try to understand what data means in today's world. Well, everybody knows that enterprises base their business models, or some enterprises base their business model on data. So today there are data-driven business models. So companies do generate earnings solely based on data. Not that they produce wealth, they gather data and then they are able to monetize this data. So for example, Google and Facebook are both monetizing on the data they have about their users because they allow other companies, third-party companies, to target such users in their marketing campaigns. So basically, data might be a business model, and there is a general thumb rule that the more data you own, the more powerful you might get. So let's assume that data in general helps in building your successful business model. But data in itself is, of course, not the most powerful element. The question is how you can get data to be actionable, how you can generate insights from data, and how you can get into change processes, into the developmental processes. So getting the data for you, and B, deriving insights, deriving actionables from data will be both points for today's video. But for us, it's not that we want to build a company based on data, we want to improve ourselves based on data. So the question is, how does such a process look like? Is it sensible to use data to self-quantify? Well, basically yes, and the movement or the topic is called self-quantification. Well, in today's world, companies gather data about you as a user. So if you, for example, go running as a sport, your running behavior is tracked and the data is saved within the company, such as Runtastic. If you navigate through Facebook, your actions are saved within Facebook. So the question is, how do we get the data? And there is a prerequisite, and this is in Europe, the GDPR prerequisite, which mandates every company to provide access to your data. So if I, Bartosz Przytula, am surfing on Facebook and my behavior data is saved by Facebook, I can try to get access to this data via Facebook. So I can request access to the data about myself from Facebook, and Facebook is obliged to provide me such an access. So this is like the first prerequisite. This is possible in today's let's say, reality. And this is pretty important. I will not get into GDPR specifics or data privacy specifics because other blogs have already described it. But in general, there is such a rule, and with most companies, such as Facebook, such as YouTube, such as Netflix, such as, you will be able to get access to such data. Second prerequisite in order to understand why data is powerful is to understand why decision making based on feelings, based on gut feelings, has some disadvantages. So let's get into math. Let's think of a task, for example, 132 times 18 plus 23. I assume that everybody who's listening now has to think about the solution. So 132 times 18 plus 23. The result is 2,399. Probably most of us will need to calculate it, will need to go through it, will need to think about it. So this is a pretty simple mathematical exercise, and it's one-dimensional. So you don't need to apply knowledge or wisdom from different sources. You don't need to answer different questions which are depending or building on each other. So it's pretty simple, and still we need to think about it. In case of multidimensional questions such as major life decisions, major life questions, we have a tendency to think less and decide based on gut feelings. So at this point, what we have is a situation where the more complex the questions the task get, we as humans, we tend to decide in a less sophisticated way, so more and more based on feelings. Not that decision based on feelings, gut feelings, are a bad idea. They help us to navigate through life, they help us to function effectively. So in general, it is a developmental attribute of humans to be able to decide based on feelings. But if we have major life decisions, for example, decisions in which directions go to at work, there are downsides on decision making based on feelings. And let's talk about such downsides. For example, about cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are, let's say, some kind of shortcuts. And they were, I don't know whether they were initially described by Daniel Kahneman, but they were described by a psychologist, Daniel Kahneman. And what he described is some shortcuts, some heuristics which humans use when they have already solved tasks and they do not want to think about it again unconsciously. So this is all happening unconsciously, because if we knew it, we would probably try to think about it consciously. So what are mental shortcuts? What are cognitive biases? We have the confirmation bias, which is probably the most known. It's the tendency to search and save such information which confirms own preconceptions. So if we think to the left, we will have a tendency to search for information which confirms our world belief, our worldview, and the same situation for the right. So if we have a tendency to think conservatively, we will search and look out for more information from the right, which means that we will have biased information, which means that our decisions will be biased and not like based on the most effective outcome, but on what we unconsciously think is best. Then we have a cognitive bias which is called anchoring. Anchoring is the tendency to base decision making on one specific information, missing out on others. So many of us tend to judge on public happenings based on one information source. So what might happen is that if an attack, if a tragedy happens, we overestimate the probability of this tragedy reoccurring in the future. Then there is something called like availability heuristics. So we have the tendency to overestimate the probability of anything which is much more present in our head. So again, it's probably the same situation with tragedies, for example. And then we have the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the tendency to overestimate own abilities while not being an expert, and underestimating own abilities while being an expert. So many of us know the people who have an opinion on a subject but do not have an idea about it actually. So those are just 4 cognitive biases, and showing that we as humans, we have the tendency to judge on things based on incomplete information, thinking that we have complete information, and judging or estimating it as very true or 100% true. So there are downsides on let's say on decision making based on feelings, because we tend to make it quick when deciding. On the other end of a spectrum, there are advantages of decision making based on facts. What are the advantages on decision making based on facts? Well, basically, the data knows best about you because it's you who generated the data. So you might say, no, but it's me who knows best about me. Yeah, basically yes, but still the data is kind of neutrally displaying what you've been doing. So it's not biased. Data is just displaying what you've been doing, is displaying the choices you made. Let's try to break it down. By data, we get some kind of consistency. So consistency in behavior, consistency in decision making. Why is it important? Well, the devil is inside of ourselves. So our inner devil always wants us to do things which require less effort because we want to save energy. At some point, it might lead to us not doing anything. So data will help us to become consistent, even if the devil in us tries to get us to not doing anything. Then we have awareness. So data helps us in recognizing developments which we see, which we feel are there, but we might at some points not acknowledge. So sometimes we know that people have not a positive impact on us, but still we are interacting with them on a daily basis. Sometimes we do not want to leave our partners. Sometimes we are running away from financial problems. So data will help us to get bad information to our consciousness. Responsiveness. Data will help us to be proactive and decide in real time. So many times we feel that something's not right in our lives, but we need like months in order to get it straight and then decide to split up or to change work or to start eating in another way or stop smoking. What data is doing, data is giving us kind of a direct feedback which allows us to directly change our behaviors. And this is our next point, built-in feedback. So when we kick a dog will bite back. This means the nature provides us a direct feedback. Data provides us direct feedback because in our daily life we do not have direct feedback. What do I mean? Well, if we do something bad, people are smiling like, yeah, and then they are talking to each other like, well, this was awkward. This guy is awkward. Let's not talk to him again. Well, data is kind of saying straightforward what is happening with you and what it means for you. So data has a built-in feedback functionality which is very powerful for you because it's just providing you the truth about you. It increases the speed of our decision making and it minimizes the influence of cognitive biases, which we discussed. So decision making based on feelings does have some downsides, and data will minimize the effect of the downsides. So in order to get a why should we even use data answer answer to the question, we have three assumptions. First one is companies are obliged to provide access to data stored about oneself. Second, quality of decision making is disturbed by feelings and cognitive biases. And then quality of decision making is increased by data as it portrays life in numbers. So those are like the pre-assumptions which we will build on in the following steps. Next point is, let's assume that we now agree on the question that on whether we should use data. Second question is, well, how can we start? What are the questions to answer? What steps do we need to make? Well, basically, I have like 5 or 6 basic questions which we need to answer. The first one is, how does the process look like? So we will answer the question, how does a process look like? what data is available and what data makes sense in respect of my personal self-development. So we will answer which data is sensible. Then what are key performance indicators about my self-development? So how can I display the data so that I get the information I need to make decisions, for example, about my eating behavior? Then how do I get certain data from companies? Then how can I make data readable for the human eye, so for me, because raw data like 90,000 lines in Excel are not readable. So we need to go through the proper process of making data readable for us. And then how can I derive actionables from my own data? And this is why I conducted a case study about myself, which I will present later on, which means that I will try to give you the feeling that only you know what the data means, because only you know what it's displaying. Still, a coach is the one who's able to trigger the thought process and help you with the thought process. So first question was, how does the process of getting into self-quantification does look like? Well, I have painted the process on my blog, coachandbusiness.com. I will try to provide you the information now on my video. Basically, it has 4 steps, which are kind of a infinite loop. So if you get to the 4th step, you will start over again. So it's called a iterative process, and it combines 4 steps. Again, its first step is you have to plan and collect the data. Second step is where you have to prepare and analyze the data. Third step is you have to find opportunities and make decisions. Fourth step is you have to activate what you have decided. Well, what is planning and collecting about? We have some questions. So first question is, which data is generally available? Second question is, which data is available and sensible for my development? Third question is, based on this data, which kind of KPIs and metrics, KPIs, key performance indicators, can I define in order to, for example, analyze my eating behavior? Then, what are the data sources for the sensible data? Then, this step is finished at the point when data gathering is finished. So, we have a definition process, a theoretical process, when we try to build the framework for our self-developmental process with the help of data. And then we need to gather the data, which is kind of a very difficult, one of the most difficult tasks, because we have to show consistency and we have to show discipline over a bigger period of time, for example, over 2 or 3 months in my case. In this regard, a coach can help in every single step. So in defining which KPIs, which data is sensible, in trying to get motivation up to gather the data. So a coach, for example myself, can help in initiating, in defining the framework, and in starting to gather the data. The second step in our meta process is preparation and analysis. So what we need to do after defining the framework and after having collected the data is we need to extract it from the platforms. We need to clean up the data. So at some points there will be missing data points. The data points will be not right. The data points will be in a language which we will not be able to use. For example, geo data and not names of cities. Then we will make sure to bring data into a comparable format. We will need to make reference points so that we will be able to compare Facebook data with, for example, Apple data. Then we will need to aggregate data so that we will not look at 50,000 lines in Excel, but we will look at, let's say, a min-max version of our data. Then we will need to calculate, for example, averages and other KPI sums. And what we will need to do is to visualize the data, because for some people looking at data points is pretty easy. For some people they need graphs, they need columns in order to understand. And this process of making data readable from raw data to graphs is again a process where a coach or a digital native, which both I can fulfill. So I'm a digital native with 10 plus years experience in digital marketing, digital consulting, and data consulting, big data consulting, as well as I'm a psychologist and coach. So I can help with with coordinating the process, the developmental process, as well as getting the technical stuff done. Then we have the opportunities and decisions process point. So what we need to do here is to understand trends and changes. Then we need to interpret these changes and trends. So we need to find reasons for trends being there. So for example, why is my weight going down? Or why is my mood going up? Why is my stress level going up? Why am I not spending as much time Facebooking, for example, etc., etc. So what are the reasons for the trends we can see in the data? And then, of course, only the person in focus knows what the data is about. So at this point, the most crucial thing is you who is able to understand and define reasons. So what we will do is we will basically try to trigger the thought process. So a coach will help in triggering the thought process in understanding what really happened there. And then the activation and will step, which is kind of the last step when enacting the things we figured out about you or you figured out about yourself, need to be brought into life. So this is the last step, and of course here too a coach can help in getting the motivation up, of conquering barriers which might be there. So we might be at a point where basically challenges will occur which will lead to our devil becoming stronger and our devil becoming the one who's disturbing our developmental process. And at this point, the MIT Sloan Management Review defined some technical reasons for which using data in a business context, in a company context, has some challenges. So what they defined is that a lack of understanding of how to use analytics in order to improve is one big reason. Additionally, many employees do not know how to get the data. The perceived costs overweigh projected benefits, so they can't define what the benefits will be when they can't quantify what the benefits will be. So there is a challenge like, why should I use the data if the project to set up data and make it readable costs us 100,000? On the other hand, the projected benefit is like 10,000 because, we don't know how we can use the data, and in general not knowing where to start. So those challenges are met by me as a digital native, digital consulting, as well as a coach. What I can help with is to go through the theoretical as well as technical process of getting data. On the other hand, we then have more emotional reasons with intra and interpersonal reasons. Intrapersonal reasons might be, for example, high efforts and high discipline is necessary. So we talked already about it. What will happen is that you will need to be very disciplined in order to get like 2 or 3 months of data about yourself from different areas of your life. So health, eating behavior, sports, social life, etc., digital usage. Then data gathering in itself is difficult because you have to define by which tools you will gather the data. And of course, for example, writing down, let's say, nutrition specific is very difficult because, again, it's a discipline is prerequisite. And we have challenges on a interpersonal level, so on a social level, because let's imagine you will be writing down every single meal every single day, which means that you will be sitting at a table with your friends and you will be typing something in order to gather data, which will of course lead to barriers from your social circle. So why are you doing this? Can't you concentrate on us? So there will be some barriers as on the one hand on intrapersonal level where you will struggle with yourself, and there will be barriers on a interpersonal level where you will struggle with others. And this is where a coach can help in getting yourself strong enough in order to deal with such barriers. So basically what we now know is how such a process will look like. The question is, at this point, how the case study of my personal development with data looked like and how I built up my framework. And this is the second part of my video, in which I will describe, my self case study. Well, so let's take a look at how the process looked like for me. How did I go through each step of the 4 steps of the infinity loop in order to get myself quantified, in order to use data to improve my self-development. As a first step, there is always plan and collect. So you have to plan the framework and collect the data. First step of the first step is to define available and sensible data. Well, first of all, there are 2 categories, which I already talked about in another video. We have self-recorded data and self-reported data. What is self-recorded or self-recording data? Well, this is data which is available via wearables, for example, or mobile devices, which people carry with them. Basically, the data is being recorded without you doing anything. So, for example, if you wear a smartwatch, an Apple Watch, for example, biomedical data will be recorded. So, the heart rate, for example. If you calories, because you move and the tracker is writing down how many calories you probably have used. Then we have behavioral data from wearables, mobile devices, platforms such as service providers. So if I call somebody, I will get data, my calling history. If I browse some content on Facebook, if I click like, it all be written down and I will have behavioral data from platforms. Then we have wearables. So what we know is that how many steps we've made, which distance we've went, how many hours we were standing, based, for example, on wearables like the Apple Watch. So what we have is biomedical data from wearables, as well as behavioral data from wearables, steps made, as well as from platforms. So our behavior with interacting with content, or our calling behavior from service provider, from our mobile phone company, or our expenditures, or our financial expenditures from our banks, for example. So all the data is recorded automatically, and we can access the data and then use it in order to basically analyze ourselves. Then we have self-reported data, or data which we will need to gather proactively. We have 2 categories in this meta category. On the one hand, we have objective behavioral data coming from apps like MyFitnessPal. So if we write down what we have eaten, it will write down the nutritional values of our meals. So how many calories we've eaten, what is the share of fat, of cholesterol, of sugar, etc. pp. As well as we can write down, for example, our weight, which is kind of objective behavioral data, but we need to collect it proactively. And there is subjective cognitive and emotional data. So what we can do is use apps like iMood Journal or Happify, and we can write down what mood we were, how was our mood, how did we feel, how was our general feeling, how was our feeling when it comes to physical health, how was our feeling when it comes to emotions, etc. pp. But not all the data is sensible. So what we need to do is we need to analyze or think about how or what can I improve, or what do I want to improve, and then which data helps me in understanding the field of improvement, of potential improvement. So for example, if I want to improve my diet, or if I want to lose weight, then I need data about my nutrition. I need data about my moving behavior, about my sports. I will probably need data about my standing and sitting time, for example. So this will be sensible data. Not sensible data might be behavioral data from platforms like Facebook. So how many likes or how many posts did I like? So this might not be sensible in a case where we want to analyze our eating behavior or improve our weight, for example. Well, then the question is, what are my KPIs? We have now defined what sensible data is. Question is, how can I then see that trends are changing, that I have made the right decision, that my decision changed my life in a positive way? How can I understand it? How can I acknowledge it? How can I get to the point to making the point? Well, basically by defining good KPIs, and let's go through my own KPIs. A good KPI in general might be the weight, for example, or weight over time. So if you want to lose weight, your weight will of course be a KPI. But let's assume that I want to understand how places, how people, how situations impact my mood or my emotional well-being. Well, then I need to gather data about my mood, and then I need to aggregate it into a KPI called mood per time and place and people. This is what I actually did. So I gathered my mood, my emotional well-being on a scale of 1 to 10 every day, within every 2 hours. And what I did is then to create an average, and then I had an average per time and place. Which I did not do is to have some kind of average based on people, because I do not want to connect real people, and especially real people whom I really like, to my own developmental process when it comes to, oh, this person has a good impact on me, this person has a bad impact on me, because it's just morally not my standard. I do not want to involve others. So what I did is to get a mood based on time, over time, and a mood based on place, which I've visited KPI. Both will be displayed in my dashboard later on. Then as an indicator of stress, because I wanted to understand, well, places do have an impact on my mood, but my mood is kind of subjective. It might underlie cognitive biases, as we discussed it before. But what about some kind of unconscious physical reaction of my body, of my whole self? What can I use? And I've been reading about heart rates and similar stuff about wearables like the Apple Watch. And what I found is heart rate variability being some kind of indicator for stress. So what I did is I used heart rate variability per time and per place, because heart rate variability connects with regions of the brain which are involved in stress appraisals. The general conclusion is that stress might have impact on the heart rate variability. A rule of thumb in this case is the higher the heart rate variability is, the lower should be the indicated stress level. Of course, we have always to keep in mind that it's very person specific, that everybody has to look into it, as well as a doctor might look into it if necessary. But as a general thumb rule, the higher the heart rate variability, the lower should be the indicated stress level. So I used the heart rate variability per time and place. Well, I wanted to lose weight because I had some kind of overweight. My colleagues at work told me that my belly is lying on my table. So I was always a kind of a sports guy, and always fit. So this was kind of a little shock to me. So I decided to lose weight, as I never needed to lose weight because I was always the sports guy. It was kind of a new task for me. I needed to change my nutrition, and what I wanted to understand is how my nutrition, how my eating behavior impacts my weight. So what I did is weight per calories and macronutrients. So I tried to create a healthy eating plan, and then I tried to understand it by analyzing my weight per calories and macronutrients. Of course, not only my nutrition was a key factor, but also my activity levels. So I'm doing a lot of sports, like I'm going swimming, I'm going to this fitness studio, and I'm playing squash, and I'm doing some kickboxing, some Thai boxing. So I'm trying out different sports. So this was a kind of the second factor with losing weight for me. What is my activity level? So how many times did I go to different sports, or per day, per week, per month? And then of course, what is my how was my calorie level when it comes to moving? And of course, there was the possibility, and this is what I already talked about, the mood and the heart rate variability. So mood from a positive perspective, heart rate variability from a stress level perspective, to connect it to people, to real people. But again, I decided to not do it because of moral aspects, and I did not decide to analyze my digital activity. Why? Because at this point I did not decide on the tool to use. I now have decided on the tool which I will use in my second analysis of myself. But in my first analysis, I did not decide on the tool to use. Right now I'm using Rescue Time. I can recommend it, but at this point I was not sure on which tool to use, so I will not analyze digital activity and will not analyze impact of digital activity, for example, of usage of certain portals on my mood, on my stress level, etc., etc. Well, then we get into the plan and collect phase, where we need to get access to the data and we need to basically get the data ready to work with it. This section in my blog is the section you can skip, because this is where I describe how to extract data from portals like MyFitnessPal nutrition data, data from Facebook, so digital usage data, data from Apple Health, so all the calories data, all the movement data, all the heart rate data. Then there is a tool called QS Access. So QS Access is an app which gets access to other apps and tries to pre-aggregate data, clean up data, so that you will not have to do the necessary work. Then we have iMood Journal as an app where we can extract data. So what is my mood? I described it on my blog. So this is what I will skip in my video, but you can go to my blog coachandbusiness.com and read about it. Then we have the preparation as well as the analysis of the data. When it comes to preparation, in general, what you have to which steps you have to go through is you have to get the data into the same format. So in my case, I worked with Excel, so in a comma-separate file format. The data values should have the same format for equal information. So if talking about date, so which day, or if talking about weekdays, they have to have the same format, so that your mood, your heart rate variability as an indicator of stress, as well as the calories eaten, will be comparable by date, for example. Then the data should have the same units for equal information, which is kind of important too, because at some points you might have seconds and minutes, for example, or you might have calories. In case of the share of grams of fat, protein, and carbs, what you have is grams, but what you need is calories. So you have to transform the data in order to get equal units to be able to compare it from a calories perspective. And you need to have the same reference point. So for me, the reference point was over time, so the date and the weekday. Then you have to aggregate data. What you basically need to do, and this is kind of a low-level mathematical exercise, is to aggregate data to averages, to sums, to min-max values, and to correlations, which is everything is possible via Excel with kind of a low-level knowledge about Excel, but still it requires work, and this is the kind of work which a digital native, a digital consultant can help with. So with the technical process, so not the improvement process, not the self-development process, but the technical process of preparing the data. Then we have the visualization step as the last step within the data collection phase. And what we have here is, let's say, the three major display possibilities of displaying data. A trend over time, a timeline basically. Then we have columns, and then we have charts, pie charts. So we have those three basic possibilities to display data. There are many more, but in our case we want to keep it simple. We want to build a dashboard which will allow us to understand our development, our improvement, and we will use those three in order to display our data. Well, this is the first part of me and of myself case study of getting through the process of using self-quantification data in order to improve myself and in order to use it in a self-developmental process. In the second part of the video, I will show you the results. So how did I aggregate data? How did I analyze data? How did I build a dashboard? As well as which insights did I generate based on the data, and how did I try to get actionables out of it, and maybe what is the future project of myself with my own data. So thank you very much for listening to the first part. Please click on the second part. I will show you my self-built dashboard. The self-built dashboard is a service which I will provide, so you will be able to access the dashboard and buy the service. So we will be able to basically get the service based on my coaching. Based on my coaching side. Thank you very much. See you next time. See you in the second part of this video. See you next time, and thank you. Bye.